I am Robert McCready at Evening Magic on Twitter. Today marks a new horizon for this channel. We have our very first guest, Ben Coleman. Ben has been a volunteer with the Trevor Project and the Log Cabin Republicans of Los Angeles, where he became the vice president of the LA chapter. Since then, he's gone on to be the chief of staff for cause-related marketing at Charity Brands. He likes cars, socializing, driving long distances to see friends, and visiting his family at destinations across the globe. Ben Coleman has been interviewed by TMC and a documentary about President Donald Trump. His friends are innumerable, and they include John Phillips, Ann Coulter, and Roger Stone. He's a handyman, a jack of all trades, and one of my mutual followers and dear friend. Thank you, Ben Coleman.
Wow. Thank you, Robert McCready.
Thank you for joining me and saying my last name the right way. I appreciate that.
I just heard you say it.
So it was a gimme. Okay,
I have my gin martini here, ice cold. This is Bombay Sapphire gin. You should only drink Bombay Sapphire gin because it has Queen Victoria on the bottle, and she is a woman to be admired. The way I make my gin martinis is straight up, shaken on ice, with 2 blue cheese olives. Cheers.
Cheers. I have a Roy Rogers.
I hope that means alcoholic.
It's no alcohol. Roy Rogers was a teetotaler.
Oh my.
I think he was famous. Okay, so the first question, what came first, being a Reaganite or a sodomite?
Well, when you put it that way, I guess I would say being a Reaganite, because I was a Reagan baby. I was born in the 80s, and I certainly wasn't a sodomite back then. So I think that is the appropriate answer to the question.
And where are you joining us from right now?
I'm at my home in Prescott, Arizona. Now, some people would say Prescott, and that's incorrect. You're supposed to say Prescott, like it has an I. I don't know why people do that, but if you say Prescott when you're here, people say, oh, you're not from Prescott, are you? No, I'm not, but I do live here now.
Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Sacramento, California, actually the suburbs out near Folsom Prison, near Folsom, California. So it's unincorporated Sacramento County, but you know, we always say Sacramento, the capital of California, the swamp of California, if you will. And I was involved in politics in Sacramento, including the time that I rode in Arnold Schwarzenegger's Humvee while he was driving, and I was in the front seat next to him. And we were on the front page of the newspaper the next day. His open-aired Humvee. That was interesting.
So this is when he was the governor, 2004?
It was right around then. Yeah, he was the governor. And I was part of this Republican club that a friend of mine who was a very Republican zealot, he was like the president or vice president of this club. And so I would go with him. It was a lot of old people. And but he was very plugged in Republican politics. He's now basically an avowed communist. So it's very interesting. You have to be careful of zealots on both sides. They can very easily swing from one to another. But anyway, he called me one night and he said, hey, how would you like to go downtown with me tomorrow morning? We're going to meet at the Hyatt because they have this photo op situation and they need like fake volunteer signature gatherers who are actually registered in Sacramento County, because Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's the governor, is going to do this big press announcement and he cannot gather signatures. He was basically giving the legislature a deadline to make certain reforms. And he said, if you don't make those reforms, I'm going to take it to the people. So he had this press thing scheduled, but it was secret. And so we showed up at the Hyatt the next morning. and we were in the room with the security people, and they said, who wants to ride in the front? Nobody raised their hand. They said, you have to wear the earpiece, and nobody raised their hand. So I said, I'll do it. So they gave me the earpiece to talk to the Secret Service. And then they put us in the Humvee, sat right in front of the Capitol, waited for Arnold to come out. He's about 5'4", came walking out in his big cowboy boots, hopped in. He said, hello, how are you? Turned on the radio, big band music, and off we drove. We were following a big flatbed trailer with cameras all over it, and we were followed by Suburbans and limousines. And we drove to an Applebee's where we had to gather signatures. So that was my foray into politics. It was fun.
Did you get to talk to him, or was the music too loud?
He played the music, I think, purposefully, so he didn't have to talk to us, but I was in the front, and occasionally he would speak to me. Well, first of all, I had to speak to him if they said into my ear something that he needed to do. Like one time we had to pull over. They said his wife is on the phone. So I had to say, Mr. Governor, please pull over. Your wife is on the phone. So the whole motorcade stops. He stops, and he took a call from his wife. And then they would tell me things like, make sure when you get out of the car at the Applebee's, out of the Humvee, at the Applebee's, make sure that he doesn't stop and talk to a lot of reporters and things on the way in. So it became my responsibility to corral him, to like make sure he was going the right direction. It was really fun and funny. I'll send you the pictures.
Okay.
And he signed our shirts. They said sign here, because we were volunteer signature gatherers. So when we were finished, I asked him if he would sign our shirts. And so I still have it. It says sign here, and then there's his signature on our shirts.
So it was Maria that called him.
Yeah.
By chance, do you know, did the housekeeper call while you were in the car with him?
Well, actually, they said his wife, but maybe that was code for the woman. I don't know.
She's very busy. I don't know why she's just calling him up. She knows what he's doing.
Well, he wasn't speaking Spanish, so.
Well, then we know that it probably was her. What was it like corralling him to get him into the restaurant?
Well, the sidewalk was lined with reporters. And so you can actually, there, on some of the news coverage from that day, you can see me. I'm like, kind of like I'm walking like this. I'm actually herding him into the restaurant, where it was full of people who had probably also been prepped, that this was going on. And they burst out in applause. And then it was his job to just walk around and talk to people. But because he was registered in Los Angeles County and we were in Sacramento County, it was my job, along with the 3 other volunteers that were in the Humvee with us. They were in the back and I was the only one in the front. It was our job to actually circulate the petition and get signatures, which we did. The ballot initiative went on the ballot. There were like 3 or 4 initiatives that all failed. So the whole thing was a total failure. But it was a fun experience.
What was the ballot initiative?
There were some kind of reforms having to do with, I think, unions and maybe taxes and things like that. It was kind of like a fiscal plan to like put California back on track. And I mean, this was back in 2004 when California still had some Republicans in the legislature, and a decent number of them actually. And he obviously was a Republican and had won the governorship. So, we thought it was bad then. It's really bad now.
When did you move from Northern California politics to Southern California politics?
I moved to San Diego in 2007, and I was there for a year. I wasn't involved in politics. I really didn't live there long enough to meet enough people to become involved. I think I went to 1 or 2 libertarian meetings. At the time, I was just curious about libertarianism. So I went to a couple of those. I actually met Carl DeMaio at a libertarian event and did some door knocking with him, door to door, personally. And if anyone's familiar with California politics, they know who Carl DeMaio is. I I didn't know that he was gay, and I was not out as gay. And I later found out that he's a big gay. But anyway, and then I moved to LA, and I remember I didn't get involved with politics right away, but I remember I lived like 1 block away from Eric Garcetti's office. He was just a council member at the time. And there was some issue that was going on right in the neighborhood where I lived. And I was like, this is ridiculous. And so I went into his office. He wasn't there, but I remember speaking with his staff and getting like a letter from him. And then he was a few years later elected as the mayor. And I was like, wow, okay. And he's been like very famous mayor of LA for, he's horrible, but and then I wasn't involved in politics though for the first like maybe 3 or 4 years in LA until I met John Phillips.
You met him socially, or did you meet him at a political event?
I actually basically met him at a political event. So I met somebody who became a very good friend named Josh Garcia at the Standard Hotel. I was there with a friend hanging out at the pool on probably a Saturday or a holiday. And we were there, ended up meeting these guys that were hanging out next to us. Josh Garcia, became friends with them and, connected on Facebook. Josh Garcia's brother, Chris Garcia, is a big Republican person in Southern California and has worked in the Trump White House at this point and is kind of an entrepreneur and all around political mover and shaker. And he, out of the blue, sent me a message on Facebook and said, hey, I see you're a Republican. I'm going to this event. Would you like to come? I checked it out. I said, sure. It was this breakfast for a congressional candidate in Manhattan Beach. And I took along a friend and I went with Chris's brother, Josh, and went to this event. And one of the people speaking there was John Bolton. And then another person speaking there was John Phillips. And I never heard or seen John Phillips before. And I later turned on the radio and I heard him on the radio. And so I was like, he's an interesting guy and he seems really nice. So I found him on Facebook and we actually connected on Facebook. And we've been friends ever since then.
If you'd found him on MySpace, you and I would have been friends sooner because he and I were friends on MySpace.
Oh my God, I'm always the last person to join these social networks. I push them off until it's kind of like they're everywhere and you kind of can't avoid it. And so I was the last person to join MySpace. And then I was the last person to join Facebook. So I'm sorry, Robert, we would have probably met then had I been more up to speed, but I was a new Facebook user. I don't even think you could like posts on Facebook back then, but yeah, you certainly couldn't put a smiley face or a heart or anything. It was like barely functional.
There was even blank space that said, I don't even know what quail looks like on Facebook in this one area where they didn't know what to put there. So they just put, I don't even know what quail looks like.
Remember when you wanted to post on Facebook and it would say your name is, it would say Ben Coleman is, and then you would have to put like hungry or, whatever, like is yearning to go out to the bars or something. Like sometimes the memories come up from like, I don't know, 2009 or something. And that's the status. That's the status on the memory is like hungry. I'm like, why does it just say hungry? And then I'm like, oh yeah, because it started with this like this attention grabber, Ben Coleman is.
And you had to go to your computer and type that before you could even continue on with the rest of your day.
Right. Yeah. Back then I remember like putting in all kinds of random things, like how it was feeling. It was almost like a diary. And now I'm like, oh, people who do that, like, no, not cool. But in regards to politics, so that I would say was my foray into Republican politics and obviously gay politics, because after meeting John and listening to his show, I went to John invited me to what he called a Southwest drink cart party at his apartment in West Hollywood. And it was a Christmas party. And he called it the Southwest drink cart party because he had this bar cart and it had all the, minis and like liquor all over the place. And you can make your own drinks there and snacks and things like that. So I went to this little get together. And at this get together, I met Charles Moran. I met a few other people there too, but met Charles, and we, became friendly, became friends. And he, a few weeks later, invited me to a Log Cabin Republicans event that was happening. And because of the prior Republican events and clubs that I used to belong to in Sacramento, I remember thinking, oh, this one's gay. It's the Log Cabin Republicans. I've heard of them before. It must be fun and fabulous and like really like entertaining and like lots of like excitement. Because the other Republican events I'd ever been to were always like boring and stodgy and like very kind of old school and like procedural. So I went with Charles to this event. It was at a restaurant up on Sunset in West Hollywood. And it was kind of this candidate forum, I think, for West Hollywood. And maybe there was one or two candidates from the city council race there. It was boring. It was so boring. It was like I felt like I was just right back up in Sacramento at these like old Republican events. And I was like, this is not fun. They're not very fun. Like they're not doing things the way I would want to do them. And so I didn't go back for like a long time, a couple of years at least. And then, became better friends with Charles over time. And he, a couple of years later, approached me and he said, hey, will you go to lunch with me and the new president of the LA chapter? And I said, sure. He said, we want to pick your brain for ideas. So I went to lunch with them. I think we went to Cicconi's and went to lunch, and they sprang it on me. They said, we want you to join the board. I said, you guys, it was so like, I went to your meeting before. It was awful. They said, yes, but we want to change things. That's why we want you to come on. We want to bring in some new people, new ideas, et cetera. I said, look, I'm willing to come in, but only if I can help like structure and change the events and the mixers and the meetups and that kind of thing. Because it has to be, I have to like find a way to make it more accessible and more entertaining. And they said, absolutely, we're open to your ideas. And so that's when I joined the board of Log Cabin Republicans in LA. And from there, I, became a lot more involved in politics in LA as well.
Were the meetings more fun after you got to have more control?
So, yes, I would say so. One of the things that I had noticed was that they were doing midweek meetings, midweek events in like a restaurant, in like kind of maybe the banquet room of a restaurant, like very kind of out of the way, no music. It costs like $25 or $30 just to go to the event, full of like older gay men, typically, who were just kind of, not that like energetic. And so I said, well, first of all, let's think about doing things on a different day, maybe like a Friday evening. We're in West Hollywood. People are going to go out anyway. So what if they go from work to a Log Cabin Republicans event that takes, an hour and a half, 2 hours, that has food and drinks, happy hour price drinks and music, and is in a place where there's kind of some energy and people around who can see us. There's visibility. We're not hidden in the back. And so we started actually meeting at the Abbey, which is like the most famous gay bar in the world, right in the middle of West Hollywood. And I somehow was able to convince the manager of the Abbey to let us have one of their spaces from like, I think it was, maybe 6 to 8 on a Friday night once a month. And we would meet there. We had a microphone with speakers, and that music from the Abbey was coming in, obviously. And we did it during their happy hour, so everyone could get happy hour drink prices. And we lowered the price to $10, which included snacks. So you could get like little finger foods and things. So instead of 30 or 25 bucks, it's $10. And then you could buy like a $6 drink, if you wanted, or you could buy more, but, they were happy hour priced. So it was lowered the barrier to entry. And then we had this visibility. We got a step and repeat that we would put up every mixer. So people knew who we were. We were no longer hiding. People were curious, like, who are these Republicans? Like, we would get people come up and say, oh, I'm a Republican too. So it really like helped kind of bring Log Cabin almost out of the closet in LA. And so, yeah, they did get a lot more fun. And we also re-energized our Pride events as well. With some interesting and fun things.
How does the Log Cabin Republican Party work with the official Republican Party?
Well, on the national level, they're not, I think, officially connected, but in California, the Log Cabin Republicans are an official, I don't know what they call it, but they're an official accredited Republican organization. And credit to LCR California and the various chapters in California. I think LCR is probably the strongest in California. They have the most chapters and the most population there. They have, in the past few years, done a very good job of, working with the California Republican Party to become an accredited, they're now a permanent accredited Republican organization. And there's some criteria that goes along with that. And it took a few years to kind of accomplish that, but they work hand in glove with them in California now. And nationally, I think, there's relationships, there's definitely close relationships, and, folks from the leadership of LCR National can pick up the phone and call Ronna McDaniel. And, I believe the RNC even has a gay and lesbians division or, outreach program. So there's been leaps and bounds made with the Republican Party for sure.
What did you think when the Log Cabin Republicans did not endorse Donald Trump in 2016?
I was furious. And most people in the LA chapter were furious. I was actually just looking the other day at messages that I was communicating with the chairman of the board at the time. And, at that time, the national board. So you have to remember that the local chapters are affiliated with the national board, but it's kind of a loose affiliation. It's not like a top down, like we're in charge and everyone does what we say organization. It's really actually more bottom up, and it's kind of almost like tangential organizations. So, but, the national LCR has a lot of messaging that people, know about. And so that trickles down to us at the local level and affected us. So I remember all of us were pretty furious. And I was communicating with the chairman or the president at the time of the national. I was like, what happened? And he was basically like, the board was very divided, but we just had, at the time, they had a kind of a majority anti-Trump presence on their board. And yeah, they chose not to endorse. And we at the local level said, okay, then we are going to endorse. And we did. And then it was not long after that there was a very strong push to get the national chapter to be more in line with kind of the movement that was happening at the time. And it still is changed at the national level.
Donald Trump was the first presidential candidate of all time to never have been against same-sex marriage. Did you know that?
I mean, I from what it sounds like, he came out of the womb like with a flag in his hand saying, I'm an ally, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, when, he was a New Yorker. He grew up in New York, like one of the most kind of, it's like San Francisco, maybe not as crazy, but, one of the most kind of tolerant places of all kinds of things. So having grown up there and, employing people, et cetera, for a long time, I think he was just kind of like, he's a very business minded person, not necessarily, he didn't care if the gays got married. So yeah, when he announced his candidacy, he was already a pro-gay marriage candidate for the first time in America's history.
Right. And he's done nothing. That's my dog making her presence known. He's done nothing but marry gay icons. And I think one of the biggest outreaches he did to the gay community was saying, here's your first lady, Melania. Enjoy. And we did, but we didn't get to see her on magazines or anything. And I loved how like a drag queen she was, like when they got um the secret recordings from her best friend, and she was talking about all they'll do is effing Christmas, or and who cares about effing Christmas or something like that. And her Christmas was beautiful, but I liked how shady she was at the same time.
She's a gay icon. And, it's funny because I think every self-respecting gay man in America, and at least in West Hollywood where I live, would have, if it hadn't been for, politics and it being that election, would have revered Melania Trump. And it was funny because, in that time in West Hollywood being such a divisive time, you could be a Republican in West Hollywood before 2016 or, the 2015 primary. You could be a Republican and, still have friends on the other side of the aisle, and you debate things like, different policies. But that election, a line was set. People said it, are you a Republican? Okay, then are you a Trump supporting Republican? And suddenly the names came out, the racist, the this and that, unfriending. I mean, it just became a huge thing. And then when he was elected, oh my goodness, the parades against him and all those things. It became a very tough time to be a gay Republican in West Hollywood. But it was always kind of funny. There were these, maybe not intentional, but these kind of codes that you could pick up on, where it was almost like you were back in the closet and there were code words and code things that people might say that would give you an indication that they were not a left-wing lunatic, like most of the people were acting like. And it would be things like, not saying like, oh, I support Donald Trump. It would be things like, Melania looks beautiful, or posting a picture where, she really, showcasing what she was wearing or something. And you could tell the people who were not in for the, shaming of being a Republican thing. Maybe they weren't saying a whole lot, but they were kind of tangentially, they were supportive of Melania. And that said a lot about who they were. Because if they were a left-wing loony bin, they didn't care. She could have looked like the most beautiful, iconic person on earth with the most gay friends of all time. And they would have hated, they hated her. But if they said one good thing about her, you knew that was someone that you could, kind of have an in with. So
Right.
interesting.
And that's basically what she was. All the designers and stuff that would design things for her. She was the ultimate gay icon, first lady.
Well, and a lot of designers wouldn't design for her. I remember I actually gained so much respect, even though I think their designs are so gaudy and awful. I gained a lot of respect for Dolce and Gabbana for basically saying, F you, like, we're going to dress her anyway. She's beautiful. She wears our clothes beautifully. And we'll put our clothes on her because people are going to look at her and say, what is that? Like, I want to wear that. Good for them. Good for them. Standing up in the face of fascism, basically.
I had a designer friend, and I suggested that he reach out and offer to do something for her, but he wouldn't touch it. I said it will make you, like that one girl that had a song, and it went to #1 on iTunes. I can't remember. I think she was blonde, and she spoke at a couple of rallies, but she did one song and it went all the way up. And her music career had been struggling, and then she did a song. Do you remember that person?
She sang a song at a
About
Trump rally.
Donald Trump. She was singing a song about Donald Trump, and then it went to #1 on iTunes. And she had been struggling for years, and then it became a thing.
So not Beyonce.
No, not Beyonce, and not Rebecca Ferguson. I think she said that she would sing for his inauguration, but she wanted to sing "Strange Fruit."
I don't recall. I don't recall. I do remember there being so many of these kind of entertainers. I remember that there's this one guy who I knew in LA, who this gay guy, and he had like this burgeoning like, music career. And I met him at a house party somewhere. And we kind of stayed in touch, but he was just like a Facebook friend. And then next thing I know, like Donald Trump's a candidate, and this guy's wearing like the capes, with "Make America Great Again" on the cape, and he's showing up and he's doing, this thing where he kicks his legs in the air. And next thing I know, he's with Don Jr. at some event. And I'm like, this guy came out of nowhere as a MAGA, like Trump supporting Republican. I never would have thought that. And I'm like, I don't know if he's really that, or if he's just trying to, raise a career out of the ashes. But certainly was one way to do it.
Who was that one woman who wore at the Grammys wore the Trump dress? Is that the same? Is that the designer that did her dress?
That black one?
Yeah, it was a black woman, and then she got very into the MAGA movement. She had a Donald Trump song. This might have been a different person that I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then she got into it with Corey Lewandowski, and then we never heard from her again.
I remember her. I don't remember her name at the moment.
I don't remember her name at the moment either, but I remember that dress. Everybody was shocked and gasped when she took off her cape and showed her dress.
Right.
And then everyone copied it. AOC copied that dress idea.
It was such an interesting time. There's an energy that comes out of being sort of pushed down. You put pressure on something and it's going to squeeze out somewhere. It's going to shoot out of whatever, narrow place that it can shoot out of, and it's going to be 10 times more than it would have been otherwise. Prior to 2015, late 2015, as a Republican in LA, things were kind of just coasting along. But, that pressure came in 2015, 2016, 2017 of being a Republican. Suddenly everyone's against you and they're just pushing. And it caused me to, me along with a lot of other Republicans to, first of all, I met so many that came out of the closet as Republican who just prior to that had been kind of just, coasting along, not really political. And then suddenly they were like, people were saying, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't, wear this, you can't wear that. And they were like, forget that. No, I'm pushing back against that. I'm going to go show my support with these people. I'm going to go to your log cabin mixers. I'm going to show up when somebody comes to speak. I'm going to go on the sidewalk and hold a sign, or a street corner. And I mean, I was one of those people too, pressure causes things to come out much more aggressively.
Were there any famous gay Republicans that came out of the closet that joined the chapter that you're allowed to talk about in public?
I don't recall. No, I don't recall anybody famous who came out around then. No, I definitely, it definitely put a lot. There were people that came onto my radar after that, like Chadwick Moore, who I started seeing kind of, cropping up here and there on social media. And then he did an interview with Tucker. And so as the VP of LA, I like sent him a Facebook message. I was like, hey, would you be willing to come and speak to us? And he responded, and he did. And now he's a friend. So, he came out to LA and spoke to us and hung out. Guy Benson came out and spoke to us with Mary Catherine Ham. There were more like bigger and better things happened because of that, because people were under fire, under pressure. We had Stormy Daniels and that Avenatti fraudulent lawyer. The city of West Hollywood wanted to give her the key to the city. And so they brought that prostitute out there and put her out on the sidewalk with a podium, and she was giving a speech, and me and some other, Trump supporting people were down the street with our signs, and we were the ones who ended up on the news. It was just, it's just things like that that just made that time so exciting.
And it's such a misread too, to think that gay people would find Stormy Daniels exciting or fabulous, when I don't think there's ever been um, such a sexual figure that gay people like. It seems like gay people like Cher. Like, I think Cher is probably a much bigger icon for the gay community. I think she's bigger than Madonna is for the gay community. Would you agree? Like, you kind of need someone that's not super sexual.
I think that Cher was a big person for the gay community of people who are older than I, maybe. I did meet her once at an event that I went to in West Hollywood, and her son or daughter or whatever, it's a big fat one. I met him when he was a son, and I met him when he was a daughter. He was in AA, and I knew someone in AA, and I would go to the events. But I met him when he was a big fat son, and I met him when he was a big fat daughter. But anyway, and so when he was a son, he was a gay man. Which was he first? Was he the son or the daughter?
It was Chastity.
Yeah.
Chastity
Oh, I met him. Yeah, I met her when she was the daughter, and she was dating another lesbian who ended up running for city council in West Hollywood. And so, because of the familial connection, that candidate host had a event, and Cher came as the headliner of the event. So I went to that with friends. It was fun. And then the daughter turned into a son, and I met him as a son. He's fat both times.
Did she remember you when she was a woman? Did she say, "Oh, I remember you when"? It's like a whole new memory, new person, new memory, like blank slate.
No, both times it was just kind of a fleeting thing, but it's just funny.
Was her partner running as a Republican?
No, definitely not.
Because Sonny Bono was a Republican.
Sonny Bono was, yeah. Sonny Bono represented Palm Springs for a long time, and then his second wife, I guess, after Cher, Mary Bono, represented in Congress, represented Palm Springs. Now Palm Springs is totally left wing, totally ruined.
What was your greatest accomplishment during this time period for you?
You, in terms of like Log Cabin and that kind of thing?
We'll leave it open-ended, however you want to answer that.
I think that the things that I did along with the other people on the board of Log Cabin was so exciting. I'm very proud of the things that we did. We were able to take the chapter from, very few members and very kind of an older, like unenergetic populace and membership to, membership in the hundreds, and young people. And we would do the Pride events where it wasn't just a table with pieces of paper, to hand out. We were doing interactive booths with, photo booths and a dunk tank, and, educating people. In order to interact with our booth, they had to do something that was kind of educational, answer questions, that, little game show kind of thing. We really brought, I think, the chapter from like one place to another place where we became very elevated and more well-known in the community. And, because of that, people came out of the closet as Republicans. I think, honestly, that was like a great accomplishment of that time.
It certainly sounds fabulous listening to you talk about it and hearing the stories, and even the drama that I've heard about it. For instance,
I love drama. Not my drama, but I do.
Right,
love drama.
personal drama is like, oh God, why me? What have I done? Other people's drama, like for instance, when Justin Bieber rolled up into your Log Cabin event. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that was so funny. You know, it was the very first meeting of 2015, January. We were we were in this place. We were actually meeting at the time in in a restaurant up on Sunset. And it turns out that it's Justin Bieber's favorite place to go. And it was kind of toward the end of our mixer. We had Ronald Reagan's assistant, Peggy Grande, who was a wonderful woman. She was his assistant when he left office. So he left office in 1989, came back to California, Bel Air, and lived there, but he had an office in Century City. And she tells the story very well. She was like, this young girl just out of college, and she never thought she would get the job, but she applied, to work in his post-presidential office. She got the job. She has these great stories, great speaker. So we had her as our guest, and she had this slideshow, and she was presenting these pictures of her with Ronald Reagan. And at some point, there was some kind of commotion like going on, but we were sort of, it was dark. The slideshow was on, and there was like these people coming in, but we didn't notice. We'd had a lot of drinks, and then that was over. And I went downstairs for something, and I saw somebody who I knew, and they said, "Hey, did you see Justin Bieber go upstairs?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm upstairs with my people." He goes, "Yeah, Justin Bieber went up there with a whole entourage." I said, "What?" So I like went back up there and looked around, and I didn't see him. And then there's kind of this like side spot, and sure enough, he was over there. And so I went over to Peggy, and I was like, "Peggy, that's Justin Bieber." She's like, "Oh my goodness." And I was like, "We have to go talk to him. Like, let's go say hi." And we tried to go over there, and he had these bodyguards, these big black bodyguards. We couldn't do it. And I just posted about it on Facebook that night. I just like posted this thing because I just thought it was kind of a funny story. Like, he showed up, and who else but John Phillips saw it on Facebook. And he's got such a news mind. And he has a radio show in Los Angeles every day, Monday through Friday. So, and he at the time was with a very big, his co-host was a very big entertainment person, been on Fox for a long time. And he said, "Would you come on the radio show?" So I said, "Okay." So I did. I had a couple shots before I went on the show midday because I was like a little nervous, and told the story on the air. And he sent the story to TMZ. TMZ thought it was a good story. They called me, said, "We want to interview you." So they interviewed me about it, and the rest is history. So if you Google Ben Coleman, Justin Bieber, you'll see the whole story. Thousands of articles, and you'll see the TMZ link. It was pretty fun. It was very, after that, for years, people would comment about, "Is Justin Bieber coming to the log cabin meeting?" and that kind of thing. It was the most PR that log cabin Republicans had gotten in ever, I think.
Who's taller, Justin Bieber or Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Oh, definitely Bieber. Schwarzenegger is small. He was short. I was actually in shock when I saw him walking up out of the Capitol, down the stairs, and up to that Humvee, and I was already sitting in it. And he was wearing these big cowboy boots. They had to be like Lucchese's or something. So they were kind of knobby, and but he definitely was small.
Did he have to use a step stool to get into the Humvee?
No, it didn't seem like it.
So
And
he
you know
pulled
what?
himself up.
Yeah, he hopped right in. That Humvee, so he's kind of famous as the first civilian to own a Humvee because they were previously only military vehicles. And he actually got like the policy changed or something because he wanted one. He got the policy changed to allow Humvees to be used as civilian vehicles after being decommissioned from the military. And so that was like one of the first. And the day before, this was such a last minute thing. The night before that, Humvee had been driven up by his personal driver from LA to Sacramento in order to be used in that photo op.
Going back to TMZ real quick, the guy that runs TMZ, isn't he gay? And is he also a gay Republican?
I don't know if he's a gay Republican, but he is gay. Yeah. What's his name? Harvey Levin.
Right. And he's friends with Ann Coulter.
Yeah, he's definitely friends with like a lot of, I would say, Republican influencers. Um, it wouldn't surprise me if he has Republican leaning tendencies, but I don't know for sure if he is or isn't. He's a Hollywood guy and he's got to, maintain being able to like interview, have his channel interview people. So he can't like come out as like a big right winger. So otherwise people would disown him. It's Hollywood.
Yeah, I think Ann Coulter says there's so many people that she's not allowed to talk about in real life being friends with because it would ruin them. Um, so it makes me wonder. There are some suspicions. I know some people that she might be friends with that people probably wouldn't want to know. And I think I'm going to put the rumor out there. I think she's friends with Ronan Farrow. I think they're friends with each other. And that's kind of interesting.
That wouldn't surprise me. I mean, look at who Ann Coulter is friends with. She's friends with Bill Maher. She goes on Bill Maher's show, and it's not, they bicker and fight and argue, and then they go out to drinks. I mean, it's true.
But he's real cool though. Like he doesn't seem like the kind of person that would hold it against you.
Definitely not. And you know what? Good for Bill Maher lately. I've been seeing so many different clips of him calling out his side. He's a pretty unabashed leftist, but he's like, so many things have gotten crazy. I mean, he's calling out the right things right now, and I'm becoming a bigger fan of his. Anne saw something before the rest of us did.
She did. Um, to wind up the show, the Paul Leslie Hour recommends turning over the end of the show to the guest so the guest can tell the whole world anything at all that's on their heart. If there's a feeling going through them right now, if it's on their mind, if it's something that's been plaguing them, anything at all, prayer request, praise report, whatever's on your heart, what do you want to say to potentially the whole world right now? You have the rest of the show.
As Robert McReady would say, McReady,
Incorrect.
McReady, as Robert would say, I recommend taking one day out of the week, for me it's Sundays, to do something or immerse yourself in something that reminds you of a time in your childhood or in your younger years where you do something that makes you feel connected to that time. For me, it's listening to gospel music. Every Sunday, I listen to music that I grew up with, that I grew up singing, that I grew up listening to, that my family sings, that my family has sung for generations. It's Southern gospel. I listen to it, I sing it, I immerse myself in it the entire day, pretty much. And I recommend doing that because, connecting yourself to your past, I think, to something that's like maybe a day gone by, a time that just doesn't exist anymore, is so grounding, and I think keeps you real, remembering who you've come from and where you've come from. And for me, gospel music just makes me think of a time even before I was born. These old gospel groups used to open for pop stars like Elvis and Johnny Cash. Their opening acts were gospel stars singing gospel music. That was what got people on their feet back in the, 60s and 70s, was, music about God and Jesus and religion, and kind of, bringing people to that place maybe of their childhood where they grew up. And now, it's Lizzo bouncing her fat all over the stage, showing her all of her private parts to everybody. It's disgusting. So to me, that's what I would leave people with, is try to bring yourself back maybe once a week or so to something that connects you to your roots and your what grounds you.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ben Coleman. Great friend, good guy, dear person. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Robert McCready. Did I say it right?
Oh, I love the sound of that. Say it again.